Hi everyone, this is Ravi. Welcome to Katalon Automation tutorial. As you all know, I've already published 36 YouTube videos covering beginners to the advanced level concepts. This is our lesson 37. Please do subscribe to the channel, click on bell icon, you'll receive notifications whenever I publish more videos. In this lesson, I'm going to teach you about the web test objects. So I'm going to cover the topic, how can you create the solid test objects using Katalon Studio so that your test case automation is very easy and effective. As part of this lesson, I'm going to cover 4 different chapters. Chapter 1, where I'm going to teach you the selection methods for web objects in Katalon Studio and the configurations. As part of this particular chapter, I'll cover 3 different topics. One is selection methods for web objects in Katalon Studio and how to configure XPath and prioritize XPath locators and how can you configure the attributes. And the fourth topic is how to configure the CSS selectors and image manually. And then in chapter 2, I'm going to talk about generating reliable object selector using Spy Web utility in Katalon Studio. As part of this, first I'm going to teach you how can you work with XPath selector using object spy and how to identify the objects using different XPath locator methods using object spy and how to identify the objects using attribute and CSS locator methods using object spy. And then in chapter 3, I'm going to talk about web image based testing in Katalon Studio. And as part of this particular chapter, I'm going to cover how can you enable image based object recognition in Katalon Studio and how can you capture the screenshots for object recognition by using Katalon Studio and how to add image locator to objects. And then in chapter 4, we are going to talk about how can you manage web test objects in Katalon Studio and the best practices. Here I'm going to talk about how to verify the web test objects and then what are the best practices to manage web test objects and what are the best practices to manage the web test objects. Now let us start the session to cover all these agenda items. In chapter 1, you will learn about selection methods for web objects in Katalon Studio and how can you configure these selection methods by using Katalon Studio. As part of section 1, you learn selection methods for web objects in Katalon Studio. So now let us understand what is selection method for web object. So in test object editor, you can add multiple locators to an object, but you must select one of them as a default locator. So the default locator is used for detecting the object during test execution. From version 7.6.0, you can make use of multiple locators of an object when using the self-healing function in Katalon. But the self-healing topic is a separate topic and that will be covered in separate lesson. So you can switch from one selection method to another selection method and the detailed content of each selection method is saved automatically. So now what are all the different selection methods that are available in Katalon? So you can choose a selection method among XPath, attributes, CSS or image and selected locator. So you can input the desired XPath or CSS locator manually as shown in the screenshot. So now let us understand the procedure to set the default selection method in Katalon Studio. So we need to open Katalon Studio, then go to Project, Settings, and Test Design. Under Test Design, you need to select Web UI. So let us go to Katalon Studio and go to Projects, Settings. Under Test Design, select Web UI. And then under the line default element locator value of test objects generated by recorder or spy, you can find these four selection methods. One is XPath, attributes, CSS, and image. If you select one of them, let's assume you selected XPath as your default selection method. Once a test object is captured using spy or recorder in Katalon Studio, a set of XPath locators are generated. And the first value is the object's default XPath locator. So let's go here. So if you see underline default element locator value of test objects generated by recorder or spy, you can see four different options. You can select either XPath as your default selection method or attribute as your default selection method, CSS or image. If you select XPath as your default selection method, and then you have to apply and close your project settings. Then what happens? Whenever you use spy or recorder, a set of XPath locators are generated. And the first value is the object's default XPath locator. And if you choose XPath or attributes, you need to configure additional settings. You need to configure XPath separately and you need to configure attributes. Let's go back here and let us understand. If you select XPath or attribute as your default locator, you need to configure additional settings for XPath and attributes. This we are going to understand and we are going to learn in the next section. And then when you are done, you will be clicking on apply and close. So now you're done with selecting the default selection method for your Katalon Studio for capturing your web objects. In section 2 of chapter 1, you will learn how can you configure XPath and how can you prioritize XPath locators. So you can prioritize XPath locators by dragging and dropping the XPath locators list. To locate the elements, Katalon Studio uses the first XPath as default. If the default XPath fails, the remaining XPaths of the list are leveraged to locate the element. To return to the default order, you need to click on Reset Default. Let us go to Katalon Studio, select Project, click on Setting. Under Test Design, select Web UI. So as I explained you, this is your XPath as a selection method. Once you select the XPath as selection method, you can drag and drop your priority of XPath locators. If I want to reduce the priority of attributes, I can just drag and drop here. If I want to reduce the priority of ID relative, drag and drop. So you can prioritize your XPath locators, and Katalon uses the first XPath locator as the default locator. If the default XPath fails, it uses the remaining XPath locators. First XPath it uses as a default locator. If it fails, it uses the remaining in the priority order. So once you complete selecting or prioritizing your XPath locators, you can just click on apply and close. Or if you want to restore, you can just restore to the defaults. So below is the list of XPath capture strategies. So if you see on the screen, we have a different XPath capture strategies. You can build XPaths by using link strategy, or you can build your XPath by using XPath image strategy, or you can capture by using attributes, custom attributes, ID relative, href, position, neighbor, or the name. So these are all the different XPath capture strategies that you can use by using Katalon Studio. As part of section 3 in chapter 1, you will learn how can you configure attributes if you select attribute as your default selection method. So you can decide which attributes to be used for detecting an object by selecting options in the column detect object by. Let us go to Katalon and go to project, click on settings, and under test design select web UI. So we already discussed about defaulting your selection method among XPath attributes, CSS selector and image, right? So now in case if you select attribute as a default selection method, you need to configure your attributes. Where? In this tab. So now you can decide the attribute used for locating an object. If you want to locate the object by using an attribute called ID, you can simply check the checkbox under detect object by. And I want to detect the object by name. I don't want to detect the object by ALT. So I'm going to uncheck this one. Okay. And then I don't want to detect the object by form. I can uncheck. And I don't want to use placeholder, for example, right? So you can basically select and deselect the attributes that you would like to use for locating an object. And to return to the default setting, you can simply click on reset to default. Here, restore defaults. As soon as you restore, see, it went back to your default setup. Okay. And now again, to add a new attribute, you can click on add. For example, these are all your default attributes provided by Katalon Studio. But what if I want to use some custom attributes? You can simply click on add and provide your new custom attribute, place underscore holder. For example, it's one new attribute that I would like to add. Okay, I add this and then check the checkbox. That's it. And to delete an attribute, you select the attribute and click on delete. So let's say I want to delete this attribute. Select the attribute that you would like to delete and click on delete. That's it. And to delete all attributes, you can simply click on clear. And now you can add the attributes manually. Okay, that is another way. I want to restore it to default. Okay, so hope now you understand how can you configure the attributes if you select attribute as your default selection method. As part of section 4 in chapter 1, you will learn how can you configure CSS selectors and image manually. To manually input your CSS locator of a test object, you need to open an object view and select the CSS option. So in selector locator, you need to enter a CSS locator value. Let us go to Katalon and let us open one object. I want to open one object called make an appointment. Okay, this is an object. Okay, so now I want to select the selection method as CSS. And then here in selector locator, you can define your own selection method, or you can define your own locator here. And then you can simply save this locator by Control S. So this is how you can define the selector locator method, or you can define your locator in CSS selector. So that's what this screenshot shows you. And then coming to configuring the image. So from version 7.2.2 onwards, Katalon supports visual object recognition. So you need to browse an image to compose an image locator for the object. For any object, if you want to create an image locator, what we need to do, you can simply go here, go to image, click on image, and you need to browse the image. You need to browse the image that you are stored in your local machine, and then you can simply point the image either in local machine, or you can store the image in your Katalon project itself. Okay, so you can browse the image that you want to use to recognize the object. So this is how you can set image locator manually. But however, I'm gonna discuss in detail how can we perform image based web testing in the upcoming sections. This brings us to the end of chapter 1. In chapter 2, you learn how can we generate reliable object selectors using SpyWeb utility in Katalon Studio. As part of section 1 in chapter 2, you will learn how can you work with XPath selector using object spy. So you can capture objects, get web element XPath or CSS locators, and manually input XPath object selectors using SpyWeb utility. SpyWeb utility provides instant feedback by auto-detecting and highlighting all elements that match with the provided selector. Now let us see step by step how can we work with XPath selector using Object Spy in Katalon Studio. So first you need to open or create a new project. From main toolbar, click on the Spy Web icon. So I already created a new project. Select Spy Web from your top menu. This is your Spy Web. Select on Spy Web. As soon as you select the Spy Web, Object Spy will be opened. So in the URL section, input the URL of the website you want to test. So we are going to use demo website provided by Katalon, okay, which is Cura Healthcare. And I have provided the URL here. Now to choose browser, click on drop down icon of the start button. So simply you can click on drop down icon and select the browser. So here I'm going to select Chrome browser. So this will open the Chrome browser and you can simply start capturing the web objects by using SpyWeb. How? So whenever you hover, let's put this aside here and then let me put it here. If you hover your mouse cursor on any object, it highlights in red color. Let's say I want to capture make appointment button. Right click and simply click on capture XPath. Okay, so this is all basic concept. How can you capture the object by using object spy? So once you capture, this is where you'll be selecting your selection method as XPath. So if you select your selection method as XPath, whenever you save the object, this object will be recognized by using the XPath or by using the selection method that you have selected. And let's go back to PPT. So it says we captured the object by right clicking, correct? And then you have to select the selection method called XPath. And then now you can simply provide the XPath locator manually. So let's do one thing. Okay, let's go back to our web page. And if you see here, let us assume I have provided this. You can basically define the locator manually here under selected locator. You can simply define the manually, and now you can click on highlight. If you see, verify and highlight the object. As soon as you click on verify and highlight, see, your object is getting highlighted. Okay, so this is how you can use XPath as a selection method by using object spy. Once you verify that your object is getting recognized by using verify highlight, right? Now you can simply save the objects. Click on save. As soon as you click on save, it will ask you to select the folder that you would like to save in, and then click on OK. As part of section 2 in chapter 2, you will learn how can you identify the objects using different XPath locator methods using object spy. So before you proceed with this particular section, I would recommend you guys to go through the basic lesson on how to locate web elements in automated tests that is available in Katalon Academy. So let us proceed with this section. First method is checking multiple attributes. You can identify an element with the combination of multiple attributes to build a unique locator. So this method is useful when an element has multiple attributes, but using only one attribute cannot create a unique locator. So let us see an example. How can we create this XPath locator by using object spy? Let's go to your Katalon, select object spy or spy web, and now let us start the session. So this will bring you the web application. So basically the URL will be opened. Okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put this to the left side. Okay, this open. Now what we'll do, I want to, let's say I want to capture a button, login button. Let's go to login, and now I want to capture this login button. Right click and then capture object. Okay, so this captures the object. Now here, instead of using this locator method, I want to create a locator with multiple attributes. So this login, let's go to login and inspect. So this login button has two attributes. Let's see what are those two attributes. Okay, so this has two attributes called ID and type. So now I want to create an XPath by using multiple attributes ID and type. So double slash, I'll start with double slash, double forward slash, star represents your any tag name and open square brackets. Now I want to use ID attribute at the rate ID equal to, now what is the ID value? It's btn login, right? So btn hyphen login. And now I want to use another attribute called type, open square braces, at the rate type. And what is the value of type? The value of type is submit, right? And then close the square braces. Now we'll see whether this Katalon identifies this login button. What we need to do is, I already entered the selector locator and click on verify highlight. See, now Katalon is able to highlight the login, and you can see found one element using XPath selector. Okay, so this is how you can use multiple attributes. And let us see other method. So our next method is, so this is what the example we already saw. Okay, our next method is index method. Specify a given tag name in terms of the index value you wish to locate. So we are going to use this when there are more than one element present in DOM with similar attributes and it becomes difficult to search them. So for example, let us see one example by using Katalon. Let us go to Katalon now and again select your object spy and start the application to the left side. Now let us log into our application. So I want to just copy this username and then I want to copy this password and click on login. Now I want to capture, let's say I want to identify this drop down by using some custom XPath. So let us first capture this object by default, okay, by clicking on capture object. Okay, now whatever the selector that is selected by Katalon, I want to change this. I want to use my custom method by using index attribute. How can we do that? Okay, let us see here, inspect this. If you observe closely, this drop down is under a div tag. Okay, this drop down is under a div tag. Okay, see here. Now this drop down is under div tag, correct? So now I want to use the div tag and then I want to use the class. What is the class? The class is equal to form group. If you see this class under div form group, this drop down is under div form group, correct? So I want to use that form hyphen group as a class. Okay, and then so if I identify, now if I verify and highlight, what happens? So it is actually highlighting multiple drop down values. Under this form group you have these many div classes. So now I want to select my first drop down. How can we do? You have this one, 2, 3, 4, multiple. See, if you see here right side, found 6 element. Now I want to select one of them, or first one. How can I do? Again, double slash select. I'm going to specify the index here, 1, select 1. Now if I verify and highlight, it is gonna identify only one element, which is this drop down. The first drop down found one element using XPath selector. Okay, so this is how you can identify or you can create XPath by using index. Okay, so now what is our next method? Chained XPath method. So you can use multiple XPath expressions and chain them. For example, use the chained XPath to find the calendar icon in the appointment section. So if you see here on the screen, this is one XPath and this is another XPath. We are making them as a chain. Okay, so now let us go to Katalon again. Now let's go to Katalon and then select Spy Web, and here let's start the application. Okay, so now I want to log into application. Just copy username and then password. So here now I want to identify this calendar icon. So first let me capture this calendar icon. I captured this calendar icon. Now instead of using this locator, I want to create my own locator by using chain method. Okay, chained XPath. What I'm going to do, let's inspect this calendar icon first. Let us inspect this. If you inspect this, you can see this calendar is present under a section. Let's see here. Okay, right click and inspect. So this is present under a section called appointment. Let's go to top. See here, this is under section with ID appointment. I'm going to use this section ID appointment plus the class of this particular calendar. So now let's see, double slash section, and I'm going to use the attribute ID equal to, what is the ID? My ID of section is appointment, correct? Let's copy this, simply copy this and paste it here, and then close your square brackets. So once that is done, I created one XPath. And what is the actual here again? So now I want to chain this XPath with where it is. This is actually under span. I want to use span tag, and what is the class? I want to use @class equal to, what is the class? This is your class, correct? Copy this class and paste it here. Okay, so done. Now close your square braces. So now if you see, if I highlight this and see what happens, okay, I want to highlight this. Okay, now verify and highlight. See, your calendar is getting identified. See, it is actually glowing in red color, and I can see found one element using XPath selector. So this is how you can identify the object by using chained XPath method in Katalon Studio. So now what is our next method? Let us go to our next method. Our next method is contains method. So you can use contains method to detect dynamic elements that contain static values. Okay, so let us see now. Let us go to again Katalon. I want to identify a button. Okay, so let's go here, object spy, and start the application. And now let us log in. Okay, so let us click on login. Now I want to identify this login button, right, by using contains. Okay, simply right click and then capture. So now instead of using my default locator, I want to modify this now. Okay, what I'm going to do, button, I'm going to keep button. Now I want to use contains method. What it contains? @id. What is the value of id? I'm saying, okay, let's go to our browser again. Okay, let's go to browser. So if you see here, inspect this. So if you see, the id of the login button is this one, btn login. So I'm going to simply specify btn hyphen login and then close your square braces. So that means, so let me close the parenthesis. So identify a button that contains an ID attribute called btn-login. So now let's verify this. See here, now your login is getting highlighted and found one element using XPath selector. Okay, so now let us go to our next method. Our next method is last. So last is a method used in an XPath expression. It is used to get the very last node. So this is also very important. Example, so in the application, let us go to Katalon and let me show you one example. Go to SpyWeb and start this. Here, if you go to the bottom of the page, you can see there are 3 social media icons, social icons, correct? So now I want to identify a social icon, the last social icon, which is third social icon. What we can do? Okay, so what if, first of all, let me do one thing. Okay, let me capture this one first of all. Okay, let's capture object. Let me capture this social icon object. Simple. Okay, let me capture this. So now, oh sorry, I'm actually inspecting this. Let me inspect this before inspect, and also let me capture this. Okay, I captured the object. So now I want to remove this. So I want to write my own XPath by using last method. What I'm going to do here, see, if you observe closely, these social icons, all these icons, 1, 2, 3. These icons are present under UL tag, correct? So I'm going to use that UL tag, UL, right? And then what is the class? I'm going to use the class of that UL. This is my class. Sorry, this one. Last in line. Copy this and then equal to paste this class icon. So if you see here, close the bracket. Now if I highlight, it highlights all those, oh sorry, it is highlighting this entire pane, this one. Under this you have 1, 2, 3, right? Now I want to identify my last one. I want to identify the last icon, not first, not second. I want to identify the third one. Okay. So these icons are present under li tag. So that's why what I'm going to do, single forward slash li open square braces last parenthesis. I'm going to use last parenthesis close square bracket. So what I'm saying, identify this UL, under this identify last li tag, simple, and now verify it. See now, see your last social icon is getting highlighted. Found one element using XPath selector. So now let us go to the next method. Our next method is start with. So the start with method finds the element using the starting text of an attribute. So this method is useful when first part of the attribute value is fixed and the rest is dynamic. Okay, so now let us see one example. Okay, here let's go back to our Katalon and SpyWeb, and here let's start the application. I want to inspect VR about your health. We care about your health. Okay, let's simply I want to capture this first. Capture the object and then inspect this object as well. Okay, so I have captured the object. Now this is my object. I want to change this. I want to create my own custom metadata, custom XPath locator by using start with. So what I'm going to do, so if you observe closely, this particular header is under H3. See, this is under H3 tag. So that's why I'm going to start with H3. I'll say starts with what? Text. Starts with text. What is the text? The text is we care about, we care about. Okay, we care about. So basically I'm not specifying entire text we care about your health. Instead I'm just saying that it should start with we care about. Okay, close the parenthesis and close your square braces. Okay, so now let's verify and highlight. See, your text is getting highlighted, right? And found one element using XPath selector. So this is how you can use start with method and you can specify part of your text. Done. So now let us go to our next method. Our next method is XPath access methods. So these XPath access methods are used to find complex or dynamic elements. So there are several XPath access methods. We will be covering some important access methods. First one is following. So this selects all elements in the document following the current node. Okay, let us see one example. Okay, let us say I want to go back here. Okay, I want to basically identify the following method. So you can identify the password text box which is located after the username field. So basically you can specify the XPath locator of your username and then specify it as a following. So that means it identifies your password. Okay, let's go to Katalon and select SpyWeb and click on start. click on login. Okay, so here I want to basically identify the password, correct? Let's simply capture this first. Okay, let me capture the password. Capture the password and then inspect this password. Okay, inspect the password. So if you observe closely, now I don't want to use this default selector method. I want to create my own method. So if you inspect username, what I'm going to do, I'm going to identify the password by using username and the following method. Okay, what I'll do, first I will identify the username. First I will identify the username, double forward slash star, that means any tag. And what is the ID of your username? My ID of username is this one, text username. Okay, what I'm doing, I'm gonna copy this text username, text hyphen username, copy this, paste this. So now what it will do is it actually identifies your username. Let's verify highlight. Okay, it is actually, see, highlighting the username, but I need the password. What I can do, double slash, I can use following syntax. Following, what I want to follow, I want to identify the tag input tag following the username. So now if I verify, now it should highlight your password. See, it is highlighting the password and it found one object. So this is how you can use following ancestor method. Okay, access method, sorry, following access method. So let's close this one. Now what is our next method? Our next method is ancestor method. So this method selects all ancestors of current node. Example, in screenshot below, you want to get the ancestors of ul tag highlighted in red color. Okay, let's go here. So let us go to Katalon and open spyweb. Okay, let's open the spyweb, and here I want to identify, let's see, start this. I want to identify one couple of objects by using ancestor method. So if you scroll down, I want to identify this ancestor. Okay, list in line. Okay, do one thing, right click and capture this object. Okay, so what I'm going to do, healthcare object, here I want to delete this one. So if you inspect this, let's go here. So what I'm going to do, under ul, see ul, right, and then I'm going to specify @class. Okay, @class equal to, so this one I want to use this ul, copy this, paste it here. Okay, this ul, see, basically all those social icons are there, right? So that's what I'm taking. Okay, and here close your square bracket. Let's say if I verify this, sorry, highlight this, it is actually highlighting the entire node of your social icons. So now if I say I need an ancestor of div, then what happens, we'll see. Verify. So what it will do, it is actually taking all the ancestors of this particular ul, 1, 2 and 3. These are all the ancestors, right? Child, parent, grandparent, right? So that means it is taking the ancestors of this particular ul. Okay, that's how you can create XPath locator, and you can identify the XPath locator by using ancestor access method. So what is our next method? Our next method is child method. How can you identify the object by using child method? Select all children of current node. Example, using the child method, you can identify all social links as shown in the below screenshot. So let us go to Katalon. Okay, so here we are going to go to spy object and then start the browser. So now I want to identify all the social icons. Okay, so let's go here, come scroll down. Okay, so I want to identify all these social icons. Okay, so for that, what we are going to do, I'm going to capture one object here. Okay, I'm going to capture one object. I'm going to capture this object. Right click and then capture the object. So what I'll do, so I'm going to remove this. Okay, let us quickly inspect this. Okay, click on inspect. So this social icons, whatever we have, those are actually present under UL, class list inline, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to write down /UL, the tag begins UL, right? And then @class equal to list inline class, copy, okay? And then verify highlight. So what it does, actually it highlights entire thing, right? Now I want to capture all the social icons under this by using child. Okay, what I'm going to do, /child. What is the child tag that I want to see? I want to see the child tag of LI, all LIs, right? LI. Now highlight now. So you should found three matches. See, it is now highlighting three social icons. It is now highlighting three social icons and it says found three elements using XPath selector. Okay, so that's how you can use child method, access method. Okay, so what is our next method? Our next method is preceding. So by using preceding, you can select all nodes that comes before the current node. Okay, for this let's go back here now. Okay, I want to identify all the objects. Let's go here, open this, start this. Now what I want to do, I want to identify all the objects. So basically all the objects that are available before login button. Before login button, I want to identify all the objects that are available before login button. What I'm going to do first, I'm going to capture this login. Just simply capture this. Okay, even though we are not going to use that, just capture that. Okay, so now just remove this. So what I'm going to do, let's inspect this login. So if you see, the login has an ID attribute, correct? So I'm going to use that ID attribute. This is your ID attribute, correct? So let's copy this ID, keep it ready, copy this. Okay, what I'm going to say, star and your @ID equal to this one, @ID. So what it will, actually it highlights your login button, but I need all the nodes that comes before login. So before login, what are all the different nodes you have? I want all those nodes. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, right click, sorry, /forward preceding colon, I need input nodes that are available before this login. Let's highlight now. It's going to highlight all the edit boxes. See, all four edit boxes are getting highlighted. Password, username, all these are actually under input nodes. Let me again do that. See, all those are actually under input nodes. Okay, it is highlighting everything. Okay, so if you see, found four elements using XPath selector. Okay, so now let us see if you have anything remaining. And okay, we have another method called following sibling and you can follow this example. Okay, you can simply use following sibling method. Okay, so this brings us to the end of our chapter 2. As part of section 2.3 in chapter 2, you learn how can we identify objects using attributes and CSS selector methods using object spy. So we need to follow the same steps until step 6 as we followed in earlier section by using XPath, right? And then in the selection method section, you can choose attribute to locate captured objects. And also in the selector locator section, it generates the XPath with the default attribute selected. But however, you can choose different attributes using detect object by column, and the selector locator will update with the new XPath based on selected attributes. So now let us go to Katalon and see an example. Okay, so this is my Katalon. Okay, so let's go to spy web, and then we are going to use the same website and click on start by using Chrome browser. And what I'm going to do, we are going to capture make appointment button. Okay, right click and capture object. So this is all we already seen in previous section. Okay, so if I select make appointment object, so here the selection method you need to select attributes. If you see, the selector locator is actually referring to an ID, which is ID button make appointment, right? But if I want to select, or if I want to use a different locator by using these attributes, what I can do, I can basically remove this. If I select ID as my attribute, what it will do, it creates an XPath by using ID attribute. If I want to select class as an attribute, it creates a new XPath by using class attribute. And see here, I can just verify and highlight. See, it is highlighting this element. And if I select ID attribute, right, and now perform verify highlight, right, it is highlighting this object. It found one element. And there is another method, you can select multiple attributes. Let's say I want to select ID and also I want to select class attribute by using this checkbox. So now you see it generated XPath by using ID attribute as well as class attribute. Now verify and highlight. See, it is finding one object which is make appointment. Also I can add text attribute. See here, now it is actually showing me an XPath by using 3 different attributes, right? And then verify the highlight, verify and highlight. See, it is able to identify one unique object. Okay, this is the way you can use different attributes to form a new locator under selector locator section. Okay, so once you are done with creating your new locator by selecting the different attributes, you can simply click on save. And then I want to override by selecting the same folder. Let's say click on OK. So now close this. So if you go back to my element here, this is my element, right? The object. If you go to attribute, right? So now I can see the XPath by using 3 different attributes. So now this element make appointment button will be located or identified by using this XPath using 3 different attributes. So that is what this slide talks about. So now let us understand how can we identify objects with CSS selector using ObjectSpy. So same way we need to follow the same steps until step 6 as we followed in earlier section. And then in the selection method section, you need to choose CSS as your selection method. And in selector locator section, Katalon generates the CSS with the default CSS locator. But you can change the CSS locator manually by inputting the CSS locator values using the methods that we learned in a separate lesson called Locate Web Elements for Automated Tests. So you can find this lesson in Katalon Academy that talks about different methods that we can use to create the CSS locator. So let us go back to our Katalon again now. So let's click on Spy Object. And then click on Start button. Okay. So by using Chrome, as soon as you click on Start button, so let me do one thing. So this time what we're going to do, we're going to click on Make Appointment. Now I want to capture the object called username. Okay. Right click and then click on Capture Object. So as soon as you click on Capture Object, so the object will be displayed in your ObjectSpy. So if you go to here, you need to select your CSS selector. That's what this slide talks about. Okay. So let me just simply select the CSS selector. And if you observe closely, this CSS selector, there is one default CSS selector that has been identified by Katalon. Right. But we need not to use this CSS selector. So you can manually create own CSS selectors that we learned in our earlier lesson as I explained you. So now let us see some example. So I want to identify this username by using attribute as my locator, okay, as my CSS selector. What I'm going to do, I want to use ID in the CSS selector. What I'm going to do, simply input in here, right click and then inspect here. Okay. So if you observe closely, if I inspect this username is actually, if you see here, this ID is txt username, right? So copy this ID and this username is under input tag. So that's why I'm using the tag input. And what is the notation for ID? It's hash, and paste it here. Okay. So now if I highlight, verify and highlight, see, it is identifying the username. Let us see another method. I want to use the class form control. Let's say copy this. Okay. Again, this input and then your hash, or sorry, input, and what is your class, which is square brackets class equal to form control. So now if I verify highlighted, so you will find 1, 2, 3, 4, all these 4 edit box have a class called form control, right? And let's say another method, I want to identify the object by using the combination of ID and other attributes. Let's say, so I can write, instead of specifying the class, I can simply denote with dot, input dot form control. Now I want to use the placeholder as my another attribute. Simply click, put it here, open square braces, placeholder is my another attribute equal to username. So now if you highlight this, now you are able to see these two objects. So that is correct. So this way you can use different selection methods or by to create your CSS selector, and you can identify the objects by using object spy. So that is what the next slide talks about. We already saw using ID attribute, we already saw using class attribute, and then we already saw using combine the ID and other attributes. This brings us to the end of our chapter 2. In chapter 3, you will learn how can you perform web image based testing in Katalon Studio. As part of section 1 in chapter 3, you will learn how can we enable image based object recognition in Katalon Studio. So Katalon Studio provides an image locator method to associate test objects with images. With this method, you can perform image-based testing when elements of the web application under test retain their appearance even though the underlying structures have changed. So this is very important. If any other attributes are getting changed, the object will be identified by using image. So this section shows you how to configure image-based object recognition, capture screenshots, and reduce the chance of failure in image-based testing. So main requirements to perform image-based testing is you should have Katalon Studio version 7.2.2 onwards. And you should have an active Katalon Studio Enterprise license. So first, how can you enable your image-based object recognition or image-based object recognition? So let's go to Katalon. So let us go to Katalon and under projects go to settings, and under self-healing you should see web UI. Under web UI you need to enable image-based testing by checking this image checkbox, and I can check this attributes as well, but you need to check this image checkbox. By default, your image based testing or your image based testing is enabled in Katalon. Simply apply and close. So that is what it is explaining. Image based object recognition is enabled by default for web test execution in project settings. As part of section 2 in chapter 3, you will learn how can you capture screenshots for object recognition and how can you use the screenshot to identify the object in Katalon Studio. To produce images associated with capture test objects, Katalon Studio includes the add screenshot button in both web recorder as well as spy utility. So here we see the spy web utility to capture screenshots. So following are the steps that we need to follow. First, we need to open spy web utility from main toolbar, and then of course you will be entering the URL that you want to test and click on start button. And then you'll be capturing the image that you would like to capture. Okay, so now let us go to Katalon. Let us go to Katalon and spy web, and let's say I want to use this URL cms.demo.katalon.com. okay, just start this and I want to bring this to the left. Now I want to capture an image, this image. Okay, right click and capture object. So now I can see the object is being captured. Okay, so here our next step is, after spy utility in the captured objects view, select the captured object and click on add screenshot button on the bottom right corner. So after spy utility verifies the image with the message screenshot taken. Okay, so now let's go back here again. Let's go to our application. So now I captured the image. Now I want to add the screenshot. If you see right side at the bottom, you have a button called add screenshot. Simply click on this. It verifies the image and immediately it adds the screenshot. Screenshot taken. The screenshot taken. Now you just save this object, save it. I want to save this in the new folder called CMS. Click OK and click OK. So now let's close this. If you go back to your Katalon, see this is the new object that we captured. As part of section 3 in chapter 3, you will learn how can we add image locator to objects. So from 7.6 version onwards, after you capture a screenshot, so we already captured the screenshot in our previous section. So by using that screenshot, web recorder or spy utility, Katalon Studio automatically adds an image locator to the associated object. To use image locator of an object, you need to select the object in the repository first. In the object view, you need to navigate to selection method and select image option over there. Let's go back to Katalon now. So if you remember correctly, in our previous section, we added this image by using add screenshot method. So you open this object and you need to navigate to image selection method. If you go to image selection method, you can see use relative path for image is enabled because we already captured the screenshot. And what is the relative path of that particular screenshot? Whatever we captured in section 2, it is screenshot targets. Let's go down here, screenshots, and then under targets, you have this folder. Under this, the image is saved, which is PNG image. Okay, so now this object will be recognized by using this relative path where the image whatever we captured is stored. So this is how you can enable image based locator for an object by using Katalon Studio. So this brings us to the end of our chapter 3. In chapter 4, you will learn how can you manage web test objects in Katalon Studio and what are all the different best practices that we need to follow in managing web objects in Katalon Studio. As part of section 1, let us first learn how to verify web test objects that are added in your Katalon Studio. The web object spy utility allows you to verify if an existing test object has valid locators. To add test objects to the web object spy dialog, to verify the detection in the application under test, you need to follow the below steps. First, you need to right click on the object item and select add to web object spy. And then the object spy dialog opens with the selected object. So in the dialog, click on start to open the browser and then click verify and highlight to double check if the web object can be located. So Katalon Studio will display the message on how many elements are found or not found. If the object is found, it will be highlighted with the red borders. Once finished, you can simply click save to add the object to the object repository as normal. So now let us go to Katalon Studio quickly. So now let us say I want to verify these objects that we added long back. I want to verify whether these elements are still valid. So what I'm going to do, right click on this object, click on add web object spy. And now it will open a dialog and you can simply click on start. Let me do one thing. Let me put it right side. Click on start. As soon as you click on start, it opens the application. So now let me put this at left side. So now if you see, you can now verify this particular object is still valid or not by selecting verify and highlight. See, I'm able to verify and highlight the object now. That means it found one element using XPath selector. So now you can simply save it. If in case you are not able to identify, you can simply modify your locator and again check, verify and highlight. And if it is satisfied and you are able to identify the object, you can simply click on save. And it will ask you to select the object that you would like to store. Select the repository that you would like to store. So let's say I want to select this repository and click on OK. So now your object is saved. So this is how you can verify the object by using SpyWeb. As part of section 2 in chapter 4, you will learn the best practices to manage web test objects. The first one is we need to follow the proper naming convention for web elements. In Katalon Studio, the object ID includes the name of the test object and the folder containing it. So with that in mind, you should use a name that corresponds with the application under test DOM structure. So include three parts in the ID. So the location of the element on the web page, the element type and appropriate name. So these three parts you need to include while naming your element. Example, you can see login page, button login. That means I'm specifying the folder of your login and I'm specifying the actual element. In the same way, checkout page, input number. And the next best practice, manage object repository. Using the recorder function may lead to a huge number of test objects in the object repository. So you need to follow the tips help you better manage your object repository. What are those tips? You have to avoid duplicate objects. Katalon Studio identifies duplicate objects as objects with the same object IDs and several common attributes. So when adding duplicate objects to the object repository, you can select one of the below options to save. First option is either you can merge changes into the existing objects. What it does, it adds unique changes of the newly recorded object to the existing object, but still keeps the existing object ID. Or you can create duplicate objects. You can simply save the newly recorded object separately from the existing object. The third option is you can replace existing objects. This overrides the ID and attributes of the existing object with the newly recorded object. So if you are using recorder for the first time, you can save all the objects with the displayed default configurations. Maintain object repository structure as per page object model. So you need to make sure the object folders are inside the object repository as per the page object model structure. So you should follow the same folder structure for the test cases and test suites as well. If you see an example below, this is my object repository and all the elements present under confirmation page are stored under folder called page appointment confirmation. All the elements or objects under login page are stored under page underscore login. All the elements that are available in home page are stored under home page folder. So this way you need to maintain the page object model folder structure. Okay, so our next best practice is use custom attributes for identifying web elements. So when you use the web recorder or SpyWeb utility in Katalon to capture a test object, it automatically generates several locators and uses the best fit option like ID. to identify such object. But in some cases, web application don't use the standard attributes for object identification. Since the attributes can change from release to release, such applications use custom attributes for testing purposes. So here an example, okay? So let us see how can we set up the custom attribute. Okay, so here is how you can configure Katalon Studio to prioritize the attributes you want to use for element locator. First, you need to go to project settings, test design and web UI. Okay, let's go to project settings, test design and web UI. Okay, I'm here. Now, change the top priority locator XPath custom attributes. So because I want to give a top priority to the custom attributes, I want to change the priority to the top. Done. Now you need to define the attribute that you would like to add. So add the custom attribute you want to use to identify the object and then click apply and close. So I'll go to attribute. I'm going to clear all the attributes. I want to add a custom attribute called placeholder. Why? Let's go to Chrome. I want to show you an example. Okay. So under this application, the username or a password are having a placeholder an attribute called placeholder username. But when I record our objects by default, these edit boxes are identified by using ID. So let's go back here now. Okay, let me show you that. Okay, let's go back here. I added placeholder and I gave a priority to the custom attributes. Now apply and close. Let me show you example here. This one I have already captured. So if you see, this username is actually identified by ID by default. So now because I changed the priority to the custom attributes and then I added my custom attribute. Now let us go to spy web and now let us spy the username. Okay, and see what happens now. Let's go here and go to login and this one, right? I want to capture username. Right click and capture the object. So if you see here, see the magic now. See, now the default locator is formed with a placeholder because we gave the priority custom attribute, right? So this is how you can start using custom attributes in case the default attributes given by Katalon does not work for you. So now let us go to next best practice. Disable self-healing where it's needed. Next one is use the image selection method effectively. So you already watched the image selection method in my previous chapter, right? So you need to use image selection method wherever it is possible. So this brings us to the end of chapter 4.